Here we are, wisdom seekers. Another morning, another time together. I was thinking about this last night while I was laying on my daughter's floor, that we are 160 days in the Bible Project, which means we have another 200 to go. We are like just scratching the surface, almost halfway. You guys are doing great. We're all doing great. Okay. Today we're going to talk about Ecclesiastes. You actually haven't read Ecclesiastes yet. We'll maybe talk just a little bit about Proverbs, round out that discussion. Also, there are new bookmarks in the back by the coffee. So for all you hard copy bookmark people, grab a few, lots to go around. Let me pray for us, and then let's spend some time together. Father, we come before you this morning realizing that we are finite, that we are small, that we are highly dependent. And many of us are getting over sicknesses, or many of us are not here this morning because we are sick. God, it's so easy for something so small to attack our bodies and to remind us that we're incapable of providing life for ourselves. So God, this morning and every morning we wake up and we come before you as the source of life. But God, not just physical life, we come to you as the source of eternal life. God, we ask that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear what you have to say to us in your word, as we know that it drives us to the source of life, Jesus Christ. God, be with us this morning and this afternoon and the rest of this week. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, any big reflections or takeaways from the book of Proverbs?
Great emails.
Great emails. That's not quite the book of Proverbs, but I do appreciate it. Yeah, there are a lot of repeating Proverbs, or there's just one or two words that are different. It's like, you're just running out of ideas, Solomon. What's going on?
Research what are actual promises are general.
Yeah. So it pushed you to want to understand the Bible holistically a little bit better and be able to discern what's a promise and what's a proverb. Nice. Yeah. That's great.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
So many times.
Yeah.
In the world,
yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah. Like Job's friends. You must have sinned. Yeah. Oh, you're suffering and the wicked perish. Job, you must have sinned. Yeah. Did anyone? Oh, yeah. Rick.
There's one I don't understand. It's twice.
Okay.
Take the garment of
Will you tell me the reference?
this one is 16.
21:16. Are you sure 21:16? One who wanders from the way of good.
2016.
2016. No worries. Take a man's garment when he has put up security for a stranger, and hold it in pledge when he puts up security for foreigners. Yes. All right, you'll get to watch me process on the spot. So a man's garment is referring to the cloak, which are viewed as what's a right called that? It's like a human right. Everyone deserves the right to their cloak. So in Jesus, when he says, if someone sues you for your tunic, give him your cloak as well. You're like, oh my gosh, that's the thing that I have the right to. So take a man's garment when he has put up security for a stranger. So in other words, maybe Kathleen is going to cover for Ben. Ben doesn't have any money to buy something from me, but he wants to buy something from me. So he goes to Kathleen and says, Kathleen, can you help me out? So Kathleen comes and says, I'll put up security for him. His word is good. His IOU will come through. And this is saying, don't just take the IOU. Say, okay, well, if that's true, hey, Kathleen, let me have your cloak, because you really do think that he'll pay for you. So I take Kathleen's cloak as a pledge for Ben, who's going to pay Pay me for this. That way it's not just an IOU. That way she doesn't get burned. That way I don't get burned. And that way Ben can't screw us both over. So that's kind of the idea of the first line. The second line is just repeating that same idea.
And so really what it's a good way to do business.
It's good. Yeah, it's wisdom in business. If someone is trustworthy, then no one should have an issue with this because they'll pay right away. Yep.
So there's no difference.
No, it's saying the same thing in two different ways. Yeah, so this would be a complementary parallel as far as the proverb. It's paralleling each other with the same idea, just stated in a different way. Yeah, great question. Mhm. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Same idea.
So did Solomon have issues with women? Because there's a lot of passages that talk about
Not a problem with women, a problem with bickering.
and gossip.
Yeah. The problem is bickering and gossip. Yeah. And I'm sure if a woman wrote it, then she would have been, how annoying is a condescending man? You know? The problem's not a man. The problem is speaking in a condescending way. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're all women are also called the crown of the head for the man. The end of the book of Proverbs just exalts the wisdom of noble character, of worthy valor. And also Proverbs chapter 1-9, lady wisdom. I mean, God's wisdom is depicted and personified as this majestic, beautiful, wise woman who brings about good. So the problem's not women. The problem is annoyingness. Please do not be annoying. No one likes that, whether you're a man or a woman. Right? Yeah, especially when you're bound together in marriage. It's like, that's the one that is just, it's like a constant dripping of the water from the rain. Or it's like being in a dry, parched desert where you have no relief. Those are funny and scary. Should be for both of us. Both men and women. Yeah.
26, 5.
25, 21, and 22. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this one gets picked up in the New Testament by Paul in Romans chapter 12. Yeah, so you're right in seeing 21 and 22 together. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. So the question is really about, like, what does it mean to heap burning coals? There are people have gone back and forth, like, two different directions on what it means to heap burning coals on the head of someone. One is that in wartime, although, like, you're fighting it out, you're duking it out with your enemy, this was an act that both sides would do, to where if your fire was going out, you could actually cross enemy lines, holding like this pot on your head, cross enemy lines. They would give you coals from your fire. That way you could bring it back, start your fire, feed your warriors, because no one wants to win off of a technicality where the other team just starves to death. So if we're going to win like men. We're going to kill them with our swords, not let them starve to death. So that's one way. So it's almost like, I mean, there are laws about, like, POW camps. Like, there are certain laws that you have to observe even in wartime for the enemy. You have to care for them in certain ways. So that'd be kind of like that idea where you still care even for your enemy. The other idea is like that heaping burning coals on someone's head is like a horrible way to have victory over them, to destroy them, to demoralize them in front of people by actually burning them alive. So which one is it? Like, that's the question that Mike is answering. So thinking about context, in verse 21, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread. All right, so you're giving something that they need. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. All right, so giving them something that they need. So because of the context, when we get to verse 22, the first line, you will heap burning coals on his head, the Lord will reward you. It seems like, because of the context, that you're giving them something that they need. However, it could be ironic that usually the expression heap burning coals on their head is like this way to almost shame them and to have victory over them. And this proverb might be saying, the real way you get victory over people is you serve them when they're in need. Either way, like the thrust of it and the point of it is to give your enemy what they need. And that's how Paul is using it in Romans chapter 12 when he quotes just the line, you will heap burning coals on his head. And he's talking about not returning evil for evil, but actually like caring for your enemies and loving them. Does that help? I mean, it almost like doesn't answer the question, but
it's clear from the context.
Yeah.
That there's, God rewards you.
Yeah.
Usually God doesn't reward
yeah. So that as far as just like, what does it mean, the burning coal on your head? You're like, don't really know.
you. Also heard that.
But
Yeah.
it's also, if you look for the 4, it also means that they're in a time of war, and in a time of war, is you're destroying your enemies. Therefore, all of those things are true, and the Lord will.
Well, nothing in it infers war.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the word for means
But
because.
enemy.
Oh, yeah. But also, the Jewish thought is I have my neighbor, which are other Jewish people, and then I have my enemies, the Gentiles.
Got it.
So
Okay.
that's not war.
Okay.
Yeah. Mike. Yeah, you should have been here last week. We don't know. Agor and Lemuel are like these unknown people that just show up right here. Agor was the son of Jekah. If that helps. It seems like he though is a it seems like he's a Gentile. Doesn't seem to be a Hebrew name. But it being an oracle, usually oracles are words from God, so it's like wisdom is coming through the oracle of a Gentile to the people of God. And then in chapter 31, we have the words of King Lemuel. There's no record of Lemuel being a king of Israel or of Judah. So again, probably a non-Israelite. But these words are the words of his mom that she taught him. So they only show up right here. This is the only records of these people. Did anyone try to apply a proverb this week? Here's a very short definition. Wisdom is applied knowledge. Applied knowledge. So to read through the whole book, to try to apply nothing. You've stored something here. You haven't really acquired wisdom yet. When you start trying to apply these things in the right context, that's when you become wise. You don't need to be very intelligent to be very wise, and very intelligent people are sometimes very foolish. Mhm. Yeah.
Or how are others perceiving me
Okay.
without, if I don't have knowledge about my actions.
Yeah. How are people perceiving me?
Like the one, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 31's a little less proverbs and more oracle.
Right.
Yeah. One of the proverbs was that a good name is way better than riches. Like, how many of you are chasing a raise at work right now? Or even chasing a job? How many of you, though, are chasing a good reputation? Because a good reputation is way better than a bank account and way better than the paycheck that you could make, no matter how many zeros it is. It'd be far better to be poor and have a good reputation than to have a crummy reputation and have a huge bank account. So applying that, it would not just be like a one-time decision. That'd be like an everyday moment. Am I going to lie right here? Or even though I know I'm doing what's right, am I going to actually make an effort to make sure it's communicated well to the person that I'm dealing with? And not just throw up my hands and say, oh, well, they can think what they would think about me as long as I know I'm doing what's right. Well, that's not going to help your reputation. Things like that. Wisdom. Yeah, you are doing what's right, perhaps, but really good to have a good reputation, a good name, more precious.
I have a client
Okay.
to cheat on my taxes. Well, you can leave early and then down the time later.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. That's called time theft.
Yeah.
That's a crime.
Yeah, so that way I'm
Yeah.
that I have integrity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Any other? Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And I think it's maybe you remember in chapter 27 some of these 5, 6, and 7. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. And who cares if someone loves you behind closed doors if they're not your friend in public? I would much rather be rebuked in public than have someone only love me behind closed doors. And you know what? Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Someone who hates you will lavish you in compliments. They'll never tell you what's wrong. But someone who really loves you, someone who is really a friend, they will hurt you sometimes with their words. But it's faithful and it's kind. It's just, you ever have that friend who like actually tells you have some food in your teeth? You're like, oh my gosh, I walked around for so long. Hey, let me give you one example of a really good friend in this room. So 2 Fridays ago, we had a worship night, a joint worship night on right by a college campus with a few other college ministries. I got a ton of people together. And I was praying with Ben. And after we're praying, he's like, hey, just so you know, we should both go get breath mints. I was like, you are a good friend. So we both walked over and I loaded up with a handful of breath mints, popped one, and then started popping them for the rest of the night. Because I had stinky breath. No one would have told me that unless they were a good friend. So even though hard things are hard to say, if you love someone, you will say them. And as a receiver, someone who is receiving these words, remember that people who say hard things to you love you. If they didn't love you, they just would ignore it. You ever watch American Idol? And people like get on there and they just are horrible singers. And they're like, whoa, my friends told me I should apply. Those are not friends. Those are not friends. Real friends would say, brother, you are horrible at singing. Please choose a different profession. Pick up painting or something. Or get lessons, but don't go on American Idol because you're going to embarrass yourself. You're going to become a TikTok sensation. And then the last one who is full loathes honey, but to one who is hungry, every bitter is sweet. This is on the receiving end. So first you're like, oh, it's talking about, what you eat. On one hand, you eat a ton of food. No one wants dessert when they're really, really full. But if you haven't eaten for a while, even something bitter will taste good. Now imagine if you're receiving something. If you never receive honest feedback one way or another, if you just get compliments all the time and then someone gives you another compliment, who cares? Who cares? It just doesn't matter at all. But if you never get feedback, then someone says something that's even bitter or hard. Well, it tastes sweet because someone actually notices you and they care about you. So, John, you got some hard things to say this week, but it sounds like you love this person. You can take courage and hopefully they will receive it and recognize that you're a good friend. Any other high view, perspective, reflections of Proverbs? Yeah, Mike. Yeah, it's a good one. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay, let's turn to Ecclesiastes. My plan for this morning is just to read as much of Ecclesiastes as we can. That's what we're going to do together. So maybe if some of you are like, I need a break from reading, maybe we will cover some of the days of reading and you can have a little break and just say, I read it today on Sunday. What are generally spoken of as the 4 wisdom books in the Bible? Someone raise their hand and give me all 4 of them. Someone raise their hand and give me all four of them. Daniel, I see your hand. Good. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, and Job. Now someone else raise your hand. Why are those four books associated as the wisdom books? Kathleen?
They are either connected by the fear.
Yep, they either have an association to Solomon or an association to the fear of the Lord. So Job, Ecclesiastes, and Proverbs are all connected by the idea of the fear of the Lord. While Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs or Song of Solomon are all connected to the person of Solomon in some way. So that's why those four books get lumped together as the wisdom books. Some people will also include the Psalms into the wisdom literature because there are some Psalms that are wisdom Psalms. Although I think it's a little bit of a stretch to include the entire book, since there are some lament Psalms, some precatory Psalms, some praise Psalms. Yes, some wisdom Psalms like Psalm 1, but a lot of them are not wisdom Psalms. So that is why we're walking through these books. And not only are they unified in those two ways, but all four of these books, they hardly speak about the core themes of the Bible that we have been reading about so far. Like there's no mention about the temple. There's no mention about the line of David or the covenant promises. There's really not mentioned specifically about the lineage of the kings. Although in Proverbs, there are some wise sayings that refer to kings. And even in the book of Ecclesiastes, there are going to be some mentions of the kings. There's no mention whatsoever of the land. There's no mention about the worry of exile or even the return from exile. So it's like these books sit outside of the big flow of the cosmic narrative of Scripture. So why do they sit outside of it? Well, because whether you're in that flow of that story or outside of it, these books have something practical and meaningful for you. Think about an Israelite sitting in exile in Babylon, outside of the land where they don't have the king reigning over them, the king of David's line. What are they supposed to do? Well, they're supposed to live under the sun according to the wisdom of God. Because they can't go to the temple and be making sacrifices. So these books, it's like a timeless treasure trove of wisdom for God's covenant people, whether they're in the land or out of it. So that's how these books kind of function for us. Proverbs looks at the world how it should be and how it often is. You do good things will begin to happen in your life. If you're a generally nice person, guess what? People will like you. Not always, right? Anyone ever feel like they're super nice and then there's that one person who's still just mean to them and doesn't like them? Like, what's up with that? Like, I'm so nice to you. How come you don't like me in return? So sometimes it doesn't work out, but most of the time it does. So that's the book of Proverbs, how the world generally should be functioning. But the book of Proverbs, or a book of Ecclesiastes and Job comes along and challenges that thinking, where you get to thinking that Proverbs are promises. That's always the way it happens. Because Job shows up, he says, I'm a pretty great guy, I'm a righteous guy, but I suffered a lot. And we see someone who goes through suffering. And the book of Ecclesiastes is someone at the tail end of his life reflecting back on all of his experience. He's like, life is a lot more complex than the book of Proverbs makes it seem like it is. You sit down at the kitchen table with your coffee in the morning, you read Proverbs, and you're like, oh, yeah, all this makes sense. At least the ones that you understand. You're like, oh, yeah, this is great. And then you go to work that morning, or you're driving to work, and you're like, this is not how I thought it would be. It's a little bit more complicated than the book of Proverbs made it seem. It's confusing at times. That's what the book of Proverbs, or book of Ecclesiastes challenges. Before we dive into it, I want to show you some high macro structure things about the book. Don't answer out loud. Do not answer out loud. Do not answer out loud. Who wrote the book of Ecclesiastes? You might be thinking, Solomon. And I say, no. Let me just point out some things. All right. First of all, Solomon's name never shows up. The book of Proverbs, these are the Proverbs of Solomon. Song of Songs, the Song of Songs of Solomon. All right. So it says the name. Ecclesiastes never says the name Solomon. beyond that, there is a large structure. It's called a frame structure where from chapter 1, verse 12, all the way to chapter 12, verse 7, that dark gray zone, those are the words of the preacher or the words of the teacher. That's what your translation says. It's the Hebrew word kohelet, one who gathers and talks. Right now, I'm a kohelet. I've gathered you together. I'm speaking to you. So from chapter 1, verse 12 all the way, or chapter 1, verse 12 all the way to chapter 12, verse 7, it's the collection of words of the preacher. Now it's those words that sound a lot like Solomon. And if we were to be investigators and try to figure out the identity of that preacher, that teacher, we might be wise to put our thumb on that's Solomon's voice, but it never says Solomon. Now outside of that, chapter 1, verse 1, it seems like all the way maybe to verse 11. And then at the very end, chapter 12, verses 8 through 14, that is a narrator speaking to us. And we're going to look at this before we actually walk through the book. There is a narrator who is presenting the words of the kohelet, the preacher, the teacher. In other words, the biblical author we would actually refer to as the narrator of this book. The narrator wants you and me to hear the words of Kohelet for a very specific reason. What we're going to do is we're actually just going to jump to those two outer frames so I can show you that. Because once you see it, you will never unsee it again. So go ahead and look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. The words of the preacher, maybe your translation, raise your hand if your translation says teacher. The words of the preacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? And then there's going to be this little poem. So the narrator is introducing us to the words of the preacher. Now jump to chapter 12. Starting in verse 8. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. Sound familiar? That was from verse 1 of chapter 1. So those two, that line at the beginning and the end is kind of like the book cover of Ecclesiastes, the book cover. Like, oh, vanity of vanities, vanity of vanities. What am I reading? Vanity of vanities. That's the book. But then it's being handed to us by like this wise sage who says, hey, I think you should read this book. Here's why I think you should read it. And he tells us a few things. Anyone ever have someone lend them a book and tell them why they think they should read it? Daniel, what's a book that someone lent to you and why did they lend it to you? Okay, so he like handed it to you and he's like, you should read this. It's really good. Like, you'll enjoy this. Okay? He was right. Nice. Wise dad. Anyone else? Yeah. Signature in the cell. And what did he say when he handed it to you? You remember? It's an interesting book. This is going to be thought-provoking. It's going to stir up your thinking. Nice. And did it? Oh, yeah, there you go. Anyone else ever have a book lent to them or given to them with a purpose? Yeah.
Right.
Nice. Great. Whenever I gift people books, I usually write like a short little note in it, like the reason why I'm giving it to them. They're not in this room, so don't go spoiling the surprise. But I'm getting a gift for someone this week, and one of them is Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, and then the other one is Emblems of the Infinite King by Ryan Lister. Both are systematic theology books. Wayne Grudem is just like a dense book that has tons of biblical references. Emblems of the Infinite King, though, it's written for like a teen, and it kind of feels like you're reading C.S. Lewis had a child with Wayne Grudem. And that's like the product. It's just so beautiful. And I already know what I'm going to write in it. In the cover of Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology, I'm going to write down, so that you always remember that theology should be biblical. And then in Emblems of the Infinite King, I'm going to write down, so that you always remember that theology should be beautiful. Those are why I'm giving them those two books. All right, so that frames the content that's inside of those books. Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and chapter 12 have a frame of why you're reading this book. Again, in verse 8, vanity of vanity, says the preacher. All is vanity. Besides being wise, the preacher, so this is the narrator speaking to us, the Kohelet also taught the people knowledge, weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs with care. It kind of sounds like Solomon. The Kohelet sought to find words of delight, things that make you happy. And uprightly he wrote words of truth. Uprightly he wrote words of truth. This can also be translated as he wrote words of truth rightly. So this is the narrator giving an affirmation of everything that you just read, that these are right and true words. That's really important, because sometimes people come to the book of Ecclesiastes, they read through it and they're like, it's the perspective of a skeptic, someone who's given up their faith, someone who doesn't know God, and this is just the pessimistic life of someone who does not know God. But the narrator is telling us these are right and true words. It's almost like the startling moment when you get to the end of the book of Job, and God says, you did not speak of me what is right, like my servant Job did. And you're like, what? Job spoke what was right? Like, it just changes everything. So when you read Ecclesiastes, these are right and true words, not just the outer frame, but the words themselves. So again, why is this old wise person handing us this book to read? The words of the wise are like goads, and like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings. They are given by one shepherd. So, like a staff that a shepherd has to redirect the sheep, has maybe a nail on it. So the shepherd pricks the sheep in the side to redirect them in life towards something different. You ever get pricked by a stick or a nail? It hurts, yeah? But when a shepherd does it to steer you away from a cliff, is he doing it to hurt you? No, he's doing it for your good. These words that you are going to read this week in Ecclesiastes, they kind of hurt. They hurt you. Some people refer to the book of Ecclesiastes as the idol smasher. This book is going to just smash your idols that you have in life and tear down all the altars that you are sacrificing to things other than Jesus Christ. So these words hurt, but they're given by one shepherd. Even though there's two voices, there's one shepherd, God giving these words. My son, beware of anything beyond these. Of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness to the flesh. To try with all your might, all your life, to wrestle down and acquire all wisdom and knowledge is an endless effort. You have enough right here. This answers it. So here is the conclusion. This is basically like that little note in the book. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. That's the takeaway of the book of Ecclesiastes. When you finish this book, like without even reading the narrator, you should have that conclusion. Oh man, you know what I should do? Even though life is very hard to understand, I should fear God and keep his commandments. Because that's my purpose as a human. I'm most fully realized when I obey God's word. That's when I'm truly human. And God's most glorified when I am most fully realized and walk in his way. But also, God's going to bring everything into judgment. He will judge because he's the just judge. Everything seen and unseen in my life and in the world. And if that's not motivation enough, I just don't know what is. Yeah? Okay, are we prepared to hear the words of the wise preacher? Let's go back to chapter 1. Okay, verse 2. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Any other translations? Raise your hand if you have a different translation. Mike, what does yours say?
Absolute futility.
Ooh, absolute futility. Who has futility? You? Nice. What does yours say?
Meaningless.
Okay, meaningless, meaningless. Who raise your hand if you have meaningless? Any other translations? Okay, so we have vanity, meaningless, and futile. Those are all very different. That's keying us in that translating whatever word is behind this is kind of difficult. So let's think about vanity. Like, what does vanity mean? Not the thing your mom did her makeup in, and not the magazine, and not the reason you think this song is about you. It never fails. Okay. What does vanity mean in this context? What would vanity mean? No.
Making it all about
Hey, what does vain mean?
It's all about you.
It doesn't have substance. Yeah. It's like a self-pursuit with no substance. Okay? Maybe that's what this word is trying to communicate. What about meaningless? If that's what this word means, what is the preacher saying? What's this book saying? Okay, what's the point? I mean, that's a little different. You know,
and then utterly.
why is this here? Everything's meaningless. I mean, even as we read the end of Ecclesiastes, does it seem like the author of Ecclesiastes thinks that everything is meaningless? No.
It's a lesson.
I mean, there is a lesson here, but definitely the author giving us this book to read, he does not think that life is meaningless. So those words cannot mean meaningless. The other translation was futile. What does futile mean? No purpose, no difference. That it does not matter what you do. Well, does the author think that? No, remember, God's going to judge everything. Fear God, keep his commandments. That sounds like things do matter, yeah? So what the heck is going on with this word? Okay. Words have meanings, yes? Words have meaning. So if you say fire, it could refer just to a flame. Or you could say, I got fired from my job, which means you got let go. You could also use the word bomb, for example. Everyone stay calm. You could use it, you could say, oh, you're the bomb. You know, is that an adjectival noun? Is that how that functions? You are the bomb. You're saying you're awesome. Or you could say it as a verb. You could say, oh, how'd the test go? Oh, I bombed. Does that mean you did awesome? No, it means you did horrible. But a bomb is something that explodes. And neither of those instances did you explode, right? So words have meanings. So the word that's being used here in Hebrew is the word hevel. Everyone can say it, hevel.
Hevel.
Okay. But this is fire, not hevel. This is hevel. Is it real? Yes. And when I try to grab it, it slips right through my fingers. Doesn't life feel like that sometimes? All right, that's what hevel is. The word hevel just means vapor or smoke. That's the plain meaning of this word behind vanity, futile, meaningless. Vapor, smoke. Now, vapor is a real thing. Smoke is a real thing, but you can't really grab it. And if you're in it, it's hard to see through it. It can confuse you at times. So it's being used as a metaphor. And as words are used in metaphor, context is king. As we move through the book, the context will lead us towards an understanding of what the word means. Sometimes the preacher means that life is difficult to understand. It's just difficult to understand as it dances away from you. It's difficult to understand. Sometimes he'll be using it and he'll mean like life is enigmatic. It's perplexing. It's frustrating. It seems paradoxical and you don't really understand how it works, and yet it is. Like trying to grab smoke. Sometimes he'll use it as an expression paired with another phrase, chasing after wind or striving after wind. So he'll say hevel and striving after wind. It would be like you're pursuits in life sometimes just feel like you're out in the field trying to wrestle with the wind and you think you'll win. What? No, you're not an airbender. That's not how this works. And then finally, sometimes he'll just use it as a short way to talk about, towards the end in chapter 11 or chapter 12, he'll say that people who are youthful should rejoice, but also remember their creator because life is hevel. Well, is there any more smoke? It's gone. Smoke is here one moment, it's gone the next. Or when you walk out in the cold, brisk morning, you can see your breath, and it's there and then it's gone. That's a metaphor used both in the Psalms and even in Ecclesiastes just for brevity, shortness. That life is short. Your youth is short. For those of you who don't feel youthful anymore, back when you felt youthful, didn't you think you'd be youthful like forever? And then all of a sudden it's just gone? It was short. And you had it for like 40, 50 years. And then gone. That's short. That's hevel. So as we're reading this word, I know your translations have an English word, but it's really easy to import different meanings into it. So if I have vanity, I'm going to read it different than I would if it said meaningless or if it said futile. So it might be helpful to just think of the word hevel or to think of the word vapor or smoke as you read this book. The author is not saying that life is meaningless. The author is not saying that there is no point. In fact, it's quite the opposite, that there is meaning and that there is a point, but that life is confusing and frustrating sometimes. So how do you navigate? How do you drive through the fog? That's what this book is about. There are two key questions in this book. The first question is there a profit or benefit from our efforts? To restate it simply, does what I do matter? The second question is, how should man live? Again, restated, how should I live? That's what this book is answering. The question, does what I do matter? And how should I live? Does what I do matter? And how should I live? The answers come at the end of the book, starting in chapter 11, verse 7, all the way through the end. You hear the preacher give his explanation, and then you hear the narrator give his explanation. They both say yes, everything will be judged by God. So yes, what you do does matter. And to the question, how should I live? The Kohelet, the preacher, will say, remember your creator and rejoice in the gift. Remember your creator and rejoice in the gift. And the way the narrator phrases that is, fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. That's how you drive through the fog. Remember that everything will be judged, and rejoice and remember your creator. Yeah. I don't think so, because this seems to be a believer saying these words. Yeah, it's not empty. It's not meaningless. It's not futile. It's hevel. It's confusing. It dances, and you can't really grasp it. It never quite looks the same. Just when you think you have a fistful of it, it disappears. All right. So let's just experience how this plays out. We're just going to read it now. Starting off with that first question, does what I do matter? Is there benefit to my effort? Hevel of Hevelim, says the preacher. Hevel, Hevelim. All is hevel. What does a human gain by all his effort at which he exerts effort under the sun in this life? Do we get anything? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down, and then the sun hustles back to the place where it rose. The wind blows to the south, goes to the north, around and around goes the wind. On its circuits, the wind returns. So just as it seems like the sun is constantly running in a circle, and just as it seems like the wind is always working, kind of feels like we're like that, huh? Endless effort. All the streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. All that effort, endless effort of the rivers and the ocean is never full. You ever feel like that? To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. It's not only do they never fill the ocean, but they never run out. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing. No one ever sees a beautiful sunrise and says, I've seen enough. No, the next day you want to see it again. Nor the ear filled with hearing. No one ever listens to Beethoven or Bach and says, I am satisfied. I will go deaf now. What has been is what will be. And what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. You think you're being creative? You think you're inventing things? You're not. You're just repeating the things that have already been done. But you're like, Sean, what about this? My iPhone. Well, what is an iPhone besides just a method of communication? And communication is nothing new. We're just reinventing the wheel to look a little bit different. You're like, oh, but what about the internet? Well, oh, you mean collecting data and transferring data? Yeah, that's been around for thousands of years. We're not creating anything new. We're just changing its form a little bit. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It's been done already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of latter things yet to be among those who come after. Things here referring primarily to people. Raise your hand if you can say both names of your parents. Hopefully everybody. Raise your hand if you can say all 4 of your grandparents' names. All right, keep your hand up if you can say all 8 names of your great-grandparents. All right, keep your hand up if you can say all 16 of your great-great-grandparents. All 16. Oh, what? You owe your existence to them. Without them, you are nothing. And you don't even know their names. 4 generations. In 4 generations, you will be forgotten. What's the point of all this? Do you get anything from all your effort? All your effort of doing the right thing? All your effort of procreating so that 4 generations from now, some schmuck can forget your name? Welcome to the book of Ecclesiastes. So the question, does what I do matter? Do you gain anything from your effort? I, the preacher, or I, the teacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. And I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It's an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. The seeking out things that are done under heaven. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is hevel. All is perplexing. All is enigmatic. Confusing, it's fleeting, it's striving after the wind. You're chasing down the wind, you can never catch it. This is a good proverb. The book of Ecclesiastes is filled with ironic proverbs. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. Think about that. A crooked branch on a tree. Well, you can actually straighten out a bent board, but the board was meant to be bent. So then to straighten it, you've actually bent what was straight. So confusing. And how many people are not here? Can we count them real quick? Shoot. Yeah. Like we're facing a task that we are not capable of doing, understanding everything that happens under the heavens. So I said in my heart, I've acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I want to understand wisdom in the world and foolishness in the world, how everything functions. And I perceived that this also is a striving after wind. So perceived, like this is his conclusion. In efforts to understand all of wisdom and all of foolishness, he knows that that's an impossible task. He's admitting that up front. Why is that? Well, for in much wisdom is much frustration. And he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. The more wisdom you have in your head, the more frustrated you are because you're like, which do I apply in this moment? You almost get paralysis by analysis. You have too much information that you don't know what to actually do in the moment. And the same thing with increased knowledge. As you know more about this world, you become much more sad about this world. You probably heard the expression, ignorance is bliss. Kind of what he's saying. So he's like, well, as I try to figure out everything and understand everything, it actually just makes me sad and frustrated. So what am I gaining by all my effort of trying to understand the world? Well, right now I'm gaining sadness and frustration. So I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure or with joy. Maybe be a better translation. It's not moral pleasure, but like happiness. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. The testing of himself is hevel. I said of laughter, it is mad. And of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. My heart still guided me with wisdom, trying to understand the world, and just a little bit of wine. Is that the secret? And how to lay hold to foolishness till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So he's trying to understand how people are happy under the sun in this life with the short times they have. How do you be happy? Anyone ever wonder that? How can I be happy in life? Good question. So here's what some of the things he tried. I made great works. I built houses at the beach, and I built houses up in the mountains, and I had a vacation home down in California and up in Washington. I built houses. I planted vineyards for myself. I had an awesome wine collection. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. It's like I made my own Garden of Eden. It was amazing. I made myself pools for which to water the forests of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves. I had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. I had houses, I had property, I had wealth, I had entertainment, I had sex, I had everything. I got it all. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil. All my effort, I was happy doing it. And this was my reward for all my toil. And then I considered all that my hands had done. Building those houses, acquiring all that wealth, having all that entertainment. I considered all that my hands had done and the effort that I had expended in doing it. And behold, it was all hevel and striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. At the end of the day, the big house, the multiple houses, the gardens, the vineyards, the entertainment gained him nothing. Enjoyable in the moment, but then gained nothing. No bank account is big enough to gain you something the poor person does not have. Because that didn't work, so I turned and considered wisdom, madness, and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has been done before. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly. Don't skip that verse. Investigating, and if everything was meaningless, then he would say, it doesn't matter if you're wise or a fool. Live it up. No, he says, I saw that there is more gain. It is better to be wise than to be a fool, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. How many of you set out on your day and said, I'm not going to open my eyes, and just went for it? No, that would be foolish. It's better to see than not to be able to see. It's better to be wise than to be a fool. The wise person has eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet, I perceived the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will also happen to me. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is enigmatic. It's a paradox. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance. How many of you know whether or not your great-great-grandparent was wise or a fool? Not only do you not remember their name, you don't remember if they're a wise or a fool. So what did wisdom gain them? For of the wise and of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. Everyone dies. You will all die. The fool and the wise. So I hated life. That's the conclusion. So I hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. For everything is hevel and striving after wind. So it is better to be wise than to be fool. But at the end of the day, being wise doesn't really gain you anything over the fool because you both die. And you're both forgotten. I hated all of my effort in which I made effort under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is hevel. This is confusing. All right, so here's the tension. He's amassed a ton of wealth and property, business of the vineyards, entertainment industry, and one day he's going to die, and all of that is going to be inherited by someone else. Maybe by progeny, like his own son will inherit it, or if he leaves no successor, then like the next person in the company will take things over. Many of you have worked in companies, or you have built things in your life, maybe a little bit of family wealth, generational wealth in the house or something. And that one day that's going to pass on to someone else. And what if they don't care at all about your efforts? What if they squander it because they're an idiot? Wouldn't that be horrible? Oh, the disrespect, like rolling over in your grave as they dance on it. Gosh, isn't that frustrating? And you don't know whether that person's going to be wise or a fool. You just gotta like hand it all over, and they either will run with it or they will crash it into the ground and it will burn, and all your effort will be forgotten. So I turned and I gave my heart up to despair over all of my effort and my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This is also hevel and a great evil. You know, it's one thing when someone works hard for what they have and they get to enjoy it. But when like some snooty, snobby, rich kid who did nothing inherits the entire family estate, you're like, this is so lame. They're so lame. They're so annoying, and yet they get everything. They didn't work for it. That's frustrating. What has a man from all of his effort and his striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? You know, a lot of hard workers in this room, whether you stay-at-home mom or you're cranking 80 hours a week at the office, a lot of hard workers. What do you really get from all of your hard work? Verse 23, well, all of your days are full of sorrow and frustration, and even in the night, your heart probably does not rest. This also is hevel. How many of you have thought about work when you're laying in bed at night? What the heck? Yeah, why are you doing that? That's what you get from all of your hard effort is sleeplessness and stress and worry and frustration. Whew. So what do? Introducing the gift of God. Verse 24. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. I'm going to give you I think a better translation of that line. And make his soul see good in his work. Find enjoyment in his toil, literally in Hebrew, and make his soul see good in his work. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the busyness of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. So the advice, verse 24, These are sometimes referred to as the Carpe Diem passages, and this is a core theme of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's going to get built on all the way through the book into a big crescendo at the end, which is remember and rejoice. So this is the advice of the teacher. Some people have taken this to be the preacher giving up and being like, whatever, well, life is confusing, I don't understand it, so you might as well eat a burger, drink a beer, and think about your day. Like, it's his resignation. I just do not think that's the case. Rather, this is the wisdom of the book of Proverbs, is to, at the end of a day, you eat and you drink, you have a meal, and you make your soul see good in your efforts. Rather than getting home and be like, what a horrible day. I hate my job. No, you sit there and you say, this was a day of work that God gave me. And there were good parts of this day. And that was from God also. And this meal before me is from the hand of God. So this tension of the book is that we all have toil, we all have work, we all have exerted energy towards a purpose or a goal. But also we have a meal every day as well. Some of you do not stop to eat your food. The idea of a meal is that you stop working. You can't eat a meal without stopping from your work. It's the idea of rest. The entire book of Ecclesiastes is Genesis 1, 2, and 3 packed into the everyday life of the person. God made work for humans. Genesis chapter 2, before there was sin, there was work. God made Adam, put him in the garden to work it. But God also made humanity to rest. You know, he put them in the garden and he said, eat from any tree that you want. Except for that one, eat from all the trees. Work and rest. Work and a meal. Every day you get to live out the drama of Genesis 1 and 2 by working and resting. You got to stop to eat your food. And when you stop, you make your soul see good, which is rejoicing and remembering your Creator. You're rejoicing over the good things that God has given you. And if you don't see good in your work, make your soul see good in your work. You have to recalibrate how you view the world around you. So this is going to get built. We're going to keep going, but this is going to get built. Verses 26 and just 26 is sometimes confusing for people. So it's not that God is rewarding people who are pleasing God, but rather the one who pleases him, the one whom it pleases God to choose to give certain things to. He gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner, not in the action sense, but in the outside of the covenant sense. Not the covenant people of God. Paul uses this expression also in Galatians to refer to non-believers, just calling them sinners. So to the sinner, God chooses to give those outside of the covenant the busyness of gathering and collecting in life. Like they're working in life, and at the end of the day, it's going to be all given over to the covenant people of God in the new creation. And he says, wow, that's perplexing. That is hevel and a striving after wind. Yeah.
I've read this, I'm going to contrast here. Kind of embodied. Hey, look, if I look at my life, what's great about working is all the stuff that I get from it. I end up miserable.
Yes.
Right? So there's the, and so I don't get any profit from my labor. Ultimately, that stuff all goes.
Yep.
I don't get profit from being going to die. Mm-hmm. Go to God anyway. But if I shift my perspective, such that wisdom itself is good, work itself is good.
Yes.
Then, even though we all have sinners and righteous, all have the same lot in life, they work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sinners, their life is miserable. Mm-hmm. And what God has given to them is miserable. Yep. The grievous task is you're going to try to collect stuff. That. Yeah. But the righteous, they see, oh no, work itself is a gift from God. Life is a gift from God. It's joy to them. So that's the contention. I mean, that's how I've kind of understood. Profit, get a value in our labor. We think that the value in our labor is what we get as a result of it. We're setting ourselves up for favor.
Yep.
Away.
Yep. Exactly. That's where this is all going. You hit the nail on the head, which either means that you are very wise or that I'm doing a great job reading this so far. So I'll just say it explicitly now. The gift is the work. Your work is God's gift to you. Yet all of us are working so that we can finally buy that boat, or finally get that second house, or finally have that trust fund set up for our children or grandchildren, or finally have the retirement plan. It's that we think of work as a means to an end. But the theology of work in both Genesis and Ecclesiastes is that the work is the gift, not the result of the work. Your work is a gift that God has given you to reflect and image God in his world. Rest is also a gift. So let's keep reading, because he's gonna say that very same thing in chapter 3. You probably know the songs that riff on this. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, time to plant, time to pluck what has been planted, time to kill and heal, a time to break down, time to build, a time to weep, time to lost my place. A time to laugh, time to mourn and dance, cast away stones, gather stones together, embrace, refrain from embracing, like COVID. Remember that? Whew. Seek things, lose things, keep things, cast things away, tear things, sow things, keep silence, time to speak. It's a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war, a time for peace. In verse 1, for everything there is a season. Maybe better would be, for everything there is an appointed time. This is looking from the sovereign view of God, that everything that takes place, there is a sovereign hand at work, and there's an appointed time that decided in eternity past, before the foundation of the world, that things would happen at an appointed time. That is God, not us. We are simply the fish in the water experiencing what he has appointed. That's why we keep reading. So what profit? What profit has the worker from all of his exerted effort? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He, that is God, has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart. In other words, God has strategically planned everything in this world, and a time for all things, appointed times, and it's beautiful. It's very wise, so beyond our comprehension, things too wonderful for us to understand. It's beautiful. And we, even as humans, have a sense of eternity beyond ourselves, that there is an eternity past and an eternity future, and that there is a plan, and that things are going according to a plan. We have this sense in us. Yet, even though he put eternity into man's heart, yet so that we cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So we have this sense that there is a plan. We just can't figure out what it is. You know, do you think that God knows and has planned the day of your death? Yes. When is that? I don't know. I know that there is a day, and I just don't know when. You know? God has planned things. I just don't know when it is. I can't figure it out. There's no map. There are some things that I do know when they have happened, or I know things that will happen. I just don't know when. And that's really frustrating. Verse 12. I perceive that there is nothing better. I perceive is usually his statements of conclusion. Here's my conclusion. There is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. So this is a little addition. Be joyful. Have joy in your life. Be happy and do good. You know, fear God and keep his commandments. Do the right thing. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and make his soul see good in his work. This is God's gift to man. This is God's gift to you. God has gifted everyone in this room to be happy, to have joy in your life, to do what's right. He's given us his word, and also to eat and drink and make our souls see good in our work. Work and rest, the gift of God for all humanity. Since Genesis chapter 1 and 2, God has gifted humanity with work and rest. Enjoy the gift of God. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Everything is planned. Even though it might feel like you don't know the outcomes of things, outcomes are set and determined by God. And what he has given us is not the ability to understand and know all things, but he has given us work and rest and joy and the ability to make our soul see good in the work and to trust God that in his wisdom, things are working together for the good of those who love him. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness. And in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. You know, politicians are supposed to be agents of justice. Is every politician just and righteous? Well, not really, according to some people. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. So that's how he deals with it. Do you have trouble with unjust politicians? Well, so did the preacher, and here's how he deals with it. He reminds himself of true theology. God will judge the righteous and the wicked, and there is a time for every matter and for every work. I don't know why God would allow someone who is unjust to be in the office that's supposed to perpetuate justice and righteousness, but I do know that God will bring everything into judgment. Because of that, I can trust him. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. As one dies, so does the other. They all have the same breath, and the man has no advantage over the beast, for all is hevel. All is short and fleeting. Here one moment, gone the next. You know, even as I was praying this morning, some of us are getting over a sickness. Others of us aren't here because we are sick. Man, we are so frail. We are so frail, and in the blink of an eye, something could take us out. All go to one place. All die, is what he's saying. All are from dust, and to dust all return. Where have we heard that? Well, it's an idea from Genesis chapter 3. From dust you have come, from dust you shall return. Job said this. It seems like Ecclesiastes is quoting the book of Job. In fact, there will be other times when the book of Ecclesiastes seems to quote Job. Interesting. It's like they're all in dialogue with each other. Okay, let's keep going. Who knows whether, and who knows, you know, everyone dies, even beasts. And who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth. Do you really know that you'll be with the Lord when you die? No, you do not. You are trusting that God's word is true. So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? You don't know what tomorrow holds, but what you do know is that you have work today and God gave it to you. And that's a gift. And if there was one thing you took away from reading this book of Ecclesiastes, is to reorient how you view your day-to-day life. That work is the gift. Being able to use your energy and your creativity to bring order into a world of chaos or to bring benefit to people who are in need. It's a beautiful thing that images God. Think about what God does on page 1 of the Bible. He takes something that's chaotic and uninhabitable and he brings order to it and then he fills it for the benefit of them. And we get to do that all the time. We get to create. We get to speak. We get to organize. We get to clean. Why is it, men, that there is something so satisfying about mowing the lawn? Because it is the gift of God to bring order into a chaotic world. Why is it for some of us that cleaning dishes is somehow satisfying? To take something that's just like disgusting and whoosh, clean and shiny. Why is that satisfying? Because it is God's gift to us. Why is it satisfying, although it is hard, to fold your laundry and to put it away? Because you're bringing order to the chaos, and it's a beautiful thing. You're imaging God. That is a gift given by God to us. Okay, we're going to keep reading just a little bit into chapter 4. Then we'll be done. Another observation. Again, I saw all the oppressions that are done under the sun. And behold, the tears of the oppressed, and they had no one to comfort them. On the side of their oppressors, there was power, and there was no one to comfort them. You guys think there's injustice and oppression in the world? Yeah, there is. And how come the oppressors never seem to actually be comforted? And how come the oppressors always seem to be in charge? Confusing, huh? Perplexing, enigmatic, hevel. And I thought, seeing this, I thought maybe the dead who are already dead, maybe they're more fortunate than the living who are still alive, because they don't have to deal with all the oppression. But even better than both is he who has not yet been and has not seen the evil deeds that are done under the sun. It's just so discouraging and depressing to see the injustice in the world. Maybe it'd be better to have never been born and have to experience such evil. Yeah, Job says things like that too. Then I saw, because there's some good things in the world, right? There's like great accomplishments of humanity. Then I saw all the effort and all the skill and work comes from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is hevel and a striving after wind. You know, all those great things, like the tallest buildings in the world. Why do people build the tallest buildings in the world? Well, because there was another building that was tallest. And if I build it just a little bit higher, I have now built the tallest building in the world. Why do people use all of their efforts and energy and finances, resources to build something bigger and more beautiful than something that already exists? Envy. Motivated by envy. Why is it that even though we all have a place to live, that all of us want to have a different place to live? Envy. When you finally get the raise or the job that you want, and then you're able to upsize to the home that you really want, and then you realize there's a different home that you want. Envy. So even the great things in this life, the motivating drive for people deep in their core is envy out of someone else's things. That's so confusing, so hevel. The striving after wind, because there's always going to be a bigger fish, That's what Ben Kenobi says in Phantom Menace. There's always a bigger fish. So what do you do? Yeah. Who knew that I was going to quote Star Wars? So there's all this oppression in the world. Like there's horrible things that take place. But then there's also all these beautiful and amazing things that take place. But it turns out that the motivation for them is really not a place of good at all. So what do you do? What do you do? Besides eat, drink, and make your soul see good, what do you do? Here is the advice of the preacher. Verse 5. Here's how a fool responds. The fool folds his hands and eats his own flesh. Better is a handful of quietness than 2 hands full of toil and a striving after wind. So these 2 lines go together. The fool folds over his hands. It's the word that refers to from your tip of your finger to your elbow. So to fold those over. Life sucks. I'm just not going to do anything then. I'm not going to participate in this corrupt world and in this world where even the good things have a bad source. So you resign your effort. That's a foolish decision. And what that does is you begin to eat your own flesh. You consume and you destroy yourself when you do that. When you resign your effort. On the other side of the spectrum, removing yourself, so he says better is a handful of quietness. We'll come back to that. Better than 2 hands full of toil and striving after wind. So the other option, this is option 1, resignation. The other option is 2 hands full of working hard and striving after wind. It's grabbing the bull by the horns in your life. This is the people in the room who have a perfect checklist for every day, every week, every year, and the next 10 years. And say, I know what I want, and I know how to attain it, and I will. That's also foolish because you can't control the next 10 years. You can't control tomorrow. And sometimes things don't go according to plan. And when you're grabbing life, the bull by the horns, you're trying to grab the wind. You can't control that. So that's also a very foolish posture. Just say, I'm going to control everything. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get it done. So, verse 6, the posture that he encourages is better is a handful of quietness or calm. The word handful is the Hebrew word kolf, which refers to the palm. So it's this image right here. This is much better. An open hand, a hand in the game, but open to receive what God brings and gives, and to be able to release what God takes. Be able to thank him and to rejoice that he gave it to you for the time, but know that it's gone. You can't control everything. So, friends, be wise. Don't resign yourself and don't try to control everything because you can do neither of those things. You either destroy yourself or you try to wrestle wind. Instead, keep a hand in the game. Participate in this life with an open hand, rejoicing at the things that God gives you for this time and this moment, and thanking him when it goes and departs. This is the wisdom of Ecclesiastes, to receive with an open hand what God has given you in each and every moment. And the way that you posture yourself like this is every day, the end of a long and hard day, sit down with a meal. And you make your soul see good in your work. And you rejoice over it. Because God has given both of those things to you, both the work and the rest. This is the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. It goes far bigger than just practical everyday life. To actually rest from your work, your efforts to attain something, instead to see the work as the gift. Is that not Christian theology of work? In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 through 10, we were dead in our sins, but God made us alive together with Christ, seated us at the right hand of God with him, because God is rich in mercy and grace. By grace, we are saved, not according to works. Works gain you nothing. But then you get to verse 10. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. God does not want work from you. He wants work for you. It is a gift. We rest in the finished work of Jesus. He is the one who worked and attained and gained. But resting in his work means that we can view all of our work, whether it's our vocational work or our homework or our work around the house and chores. And we can see it as a beautiful gift of God, even if we don't understand everything happening in the world. Ecclesiastes wants you to remember your Creator and rejoice in him. Ecclesiastes wants you to fear God and keep his commandments. Because what you do does matter. What you do does matter in this life. And everything does have a purpose. Let me pray for us, and let's go worship. Father, thank you for the wisdom books. God, so ancient, yet so practical for us. God, we're thankful that although your word is timely, it's also timeless, and it speaks to us now thousands of years later. We're thankful that your word is living and active, and that's sharper than a double-edged sword, and it cuts deep to our core. But God, as a good shepherd, you poke us, you prick us, you even cut us, not for our harm, but for our good. So God, we ask that you would give us a heart that rejoices when we feel the poking and the prodding of your Spirit through your word, and that we would remember you as our Creator, and that we would fear you and keep your commandments. Above all, that we would trust the work of your Son, and that we would rest in his finished work. We love you. We need you. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.